influence. Oh, I think I'll move to the breath now, the mind. So then we're not really in control. So that's also not so good.
When we study about the mind and mental factors, so mind and awareness, according to Asanga's text, are
according to
Asanga. So mind and awareness are synonymous, are the same. And here it seems they are not the same.
Right.
Phenomena.
So that's coming up in the text in the bottom of page 4. So I'll answer it there. But the short answer is we have to be very careful when we see this word awareness for 2 reasons. One is that word can mean different things in different contexts. And secondly, you'll find different translators are translating different Sanskrit terms with the same word awareness, which is very confusing. Very confusing. And we'll have a look more at this word awareness. It comes up a little bit just down the bottom of the page, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the short answer is basically when we see that word, we have to then ask, how is this person using this word? Like one example, as you said, is that often their mind and awareness are synonymous. But also you see then in Mahamudra and I think in Dzogchen, they're actually mutually exclusive. If it's one, it can't be the other.
Yeah.
It's in fact, there's a text called Distinguishing Mind from Awareness. So, but there, of course, they're using the word awareness is a very different way than what you were suggesting. Same word, different meaning. So we have to be very careful when we see this word awareness and understand what is the context, how is this person using this word, and what are they referring to. Otherwise, just a lot of confusion.
Especially in Hebrew, when it's so close, the words are so close, it's very confusing and people confuse them.
That's why it's good, and that's what I try to do, is go back to the original Sanskrit term, and then you know what the person's talking about. Because the Sanskrit terms are very clearly defined.
What is the Sanskrit term? I want to continue the same subject. He started, and everybody and started. So my question is, what's the advantage of the meditation of awareness as opposed to as more than mind? And then the second part of the question is, when you focus on awareness, what you do when the subject came up eventually?
When the what?
When thought or something come up. So
Right.
what you do different than the mind,
Sure.
focus on okay?
And we're going to talk more about that in the next session. I'll explain more, so I'll give a brief answer now. Which one is the best? The best one is the one that works best for you. That's the best one. They all lead to the same result. And for you, this might work better. For others, it may be this. For other people, mental image is best. The difference here is in the mind, and we'll look at this more in the next session, is we are observing mental events. They are part of the object. We're interested in thoughts, emotions, memories, without, of course, getting caught up. Here, they'll still appear, but we're not interested in them. Let them be there, but we're not paying any attention to them. And that's actually also coming up in the text, so we'll get to that. So let's go back to the text, because I think a lot of these questions will be answered, hopefully, in the next couple of paragraphs. So then for the middle of page 4, he says, within that state of fleeting appearances, do not modify anything with discursive thoughts such as hopes thinking about accomplishing certain goals or fears concerned about whether or not certain undesirable things will eventuate. Meaning not to dwell in the past or the future. Without wavering, that is, without dwelling in the past, without anticipating the future, and without moving around in the present, settle in meditative equipoise within that state for a short while. So meditative equipoise means balance. So it means to rest or settle in a state free of dullness and distraction for a short while. Meaning that as a beginner, we meditate short periods of time. We are always emphasizing quality over quantity. If we try and meditate too long in this shamatha practice, we're just going to drift into dullness and distraction. How short to meditate? Well, of course, depend on us as a beginner, but often 15, 20, 25 minutes as a beginning point can be a good amount of time. Some of us less, some of us more. But always emphasizing quality over quantity. If you want to meditate longer, but you can't sustain it, break that session into 2 with a little break in the middle. So always quality over quantity. Once we start to go deeper into the practice, we'll need to extend how long we meditate to be able to go deeper into the practice. But always emphasizing quality over quantity. Then it says, when settling the mind in this way, it is not that you stop your attention like when fainting or falling asleep. Rather, station the guard of non-forgetful mindfulness so that the mind that is unwaveringly still does not become distracted. So remember again, mindfulness is holding the object so we don't become distracted. In that way, the observed object is bound by the rope of mindfulness. So we saw that in the analogy that in the chart is that the mindfulness is symbolized by the rope. We are tying our mind with the rope of mindfulness to the object. If, however, mindfulness degenerates, there will be a great danger of the proliferation of thoughts that will move the mind. Therefore, it is necessary to set up introspection like a watcher to be aware of whether or not the mind is moving elsewhere, due to the strength of mindfulness having become weak. So again, we need to monitor that mindfulness with this introspection. So introspection is quality control, noticing if we're becoming dull or distracted. And there's a very well-known quote here from Baba Viveka, his text Heart of the Middle Way. He says, "The elephant of the mind that is out of control is to be bound with certainty by the rope of mindfulness to the firm post of the observed object, and gradually brought under control by the hook of introspection." So this is the metaphor that's used in this chart, this shamatha chart. Then he says, in brief, accomplishing faultless concentration does not go beyond the manner of sustaining mindfulness and introspection. So these are the 2 main tools, mindfulness and introspection. Furthermore, mindfulness is principle, and if this is present, then introspection, which is said to be the result of mindfulness, comes naturally. So of the 2 tools, mindfulness is principle, meaning if we are improving our ability to hold the object, then naturally as a byproduct of that, our ability to monitor that also is improving. Then it says, now attentively focus mindfulness on the mind's nature of awareness and clarity and observe it single-pointedly and nakedly. So here it talks about the mind's nature of awareness and clarity. So this is usually or often how the mind is defined in Buddhism.
Clear knowing.
Exactly. So often we see that the definition of mind is that which is clear and knowing, or here translated as clarity and awareness. So in this 2-word definition, the first word is describing the entity. And the second word is describing the function. So, for example, a simple definition of fire is hot and burning. So what is the entity or nature of fire? Is heat. What does fire do? It burns. So what is the entity or nature of the mind? The mind is clear or has clarity. What does the mind do? It knows, it is aware. So this is the 2-word definition. And this word clear or clarity is really implying 2 things. One is the mind is not physical. So in Buddhism, of course, there are two types of phenomena. There are physical phenomena and mental phenomena. And the word clear or clarity is also implying that because the mind is clear or has clarity, therefore appearances can arise in the mind. Just like because a mirror is clear or has clarity, appearances, reflections can appear in the mirror. And then what does the mind do? It knows, it is aware. It knows or is aware of those appearances. So this is the simple definition of the mind. And what's being said here is that we are to observe our mind, which has these attributes. And what you'll find, of course, is that as we observe that mind and we improve relaxation, stability, clarity, then these qualities of mind will become more obvious to us. Now, of course, they're probably not very obvious to us. So here we see this word awareness. So here the word awareness is used as a verb, to be aware, a function. So here the word awareness is used to describe the function of the mind. That the mind knows, the mind is aware. Sometimes, if we're speaking very generally, sometimes these three terms, mind, awareness, consciousness, are synonymous. They mean the same thing when we speak generally. But sometimes if we speak very specific context, these words take on a specific meaning. Then they're not meaning the same thing. And in some traditions, particularly the Kagyu Nyingma, the Mahamudra Dzogchen traditions, when they use this word here, mind, so remember, we have three levels of consciousness or mind. So often in these traditions, Mahamudra Dzogchen, when they use the word mind, they mean this. Particularly coarse. So when they use the word mind, they mean conceptual mind. And when they use the word awareness, they mean this. So therefore in those traditions, if it's mind, it's not awareness. If it's awareness, it's not mind. This word awareness in Tibetan is rikpa. And so in Dzogchen tradition, when they use the word rikpa, they mean this, just this. So therefore, again, we have to be very careful when we see these words to understand the context and how those words are being used. Otherwise, a lot of confusion.
And in Sanskrit,
a lot of confusion.
In Sanskrit, how do you describe mind, consciousness, and awareness?
Mind is chitta. Consciousness is, good question, shepa. This is vidya. Rikpa is vidya, is knowing. Consciousness is Sanskrit, shepa. Can't think now. I don't remember, but it's a different term. But again, we have to be very careful. Because even the Tibetan word rikpa, which in the Dzogchen tradition, rikpa means this. But in Tibetan, the definition of mind is sel shin rikpa. Rikpa is the definition here. So this rikpa here is not that. So we have to be very careful, even when we hear the word rikpa in Tibetan. Usually in Dzogchen, rikpa means this. But rikpa just means, in general, knowing, to be aware.
Regarding the mind equals clear and knowing,
Right.
Is it in the context of is it refer to the mind as a part of the human experience of the 5 aggregates, or is it the clear mind beyond the
Well, if you're using the 5 aggregates, the first is the body, and the other 4 together is the mind.
And when it says that the person with a human is dead, then he gives back the aggregates. That he doesn't experience the experience of the mind is no longer through the 5 aggregates.
Correct. So therefore, when we talk 5 aggregates now, the mind, those 4 that are mind, is this. Which means in the death process, we go down here. So this is shut down. So in the terms of the body stopping working, the mind shutting down, the 5 aggregates finished, means this is shut down. Doesn't mean mind in general has disappeared.
Yeah.
What does it mean the mind is knowing? I can understand.
The mind is aware. That's the function of the mind. That doesn't mean, of course, we know everything.
Yeah.
But that's the function of the mind. How well that is operating, of course, will depend on us as an individual.
I don't understand.
Like you can have the function of a car is to be able to go somewhere, but it could be broken. It could be not functioning well, but it's still, the function is it can go somewhere, isn't it? But whether or not it's going well, we're not sure. So again, the mind knows, is aware, but how well that is operating will be a lot of difference depending on what's happening. Then we better go for lunch after this question.
So you said the entity of the mind is clarity, is in...
Yeah, clear or clarity.
So you said it reflects like a mirror.
Well, that's one of the ways of describing this word clarity.
Okay, but the mirror only reflects if there's someone there to see the reflection. So this is like...
Right, but remember, this is not an example, it's an analogy.
Okay.
So whenever we use an analogy, analogies are never examples. If you think they're examples, then you take the analogy too far and then it falls down like this, exactly like this. So the analogy is only the reflective quality. It's not that, but for the mirror, someone needs to see it, we need an external object. That's not part of the analogy. The analogy is the reflective ability of a mirror. That's it. That's the limit of the analogy. Remember, it's not an example. An analogy is never an example. Analogy is a more simple thing to describe a deeper thing. And that's what often happens. We see these analogies and we think of them as examples. And then, of course, it doesn't work. Okay, let's stop there, break for lunch, and then come back after lunch and first we'll start with this awareness practice. I'll describe it, we'll meditate, and then we'll continue on in the text.